Create Labs, AI rendered assistant.
Yes.
And now Clara, tell me about Clara.
So Clara, I mean, every Tony Stark needs their Jarvis, right? And in the hood, they call me Bordy Starks because I'm a Puerto Rican, tech guy. So,
I like that.
the Bordy Starks needs his Jarvis. So I made Clara, right? And at first it was just supposed to be text.
Right.
I was like, I need an assistant that understands our mission, that I'm going to train the first chatbot. And I'm like, one of the first prompt engineers of color. So I'm like, all right, I need to train a GPT that understands us.
How you doing? Welcome to the Know Your Rights Camp podcast. I'm Tat Wza. I am going to be your special tech correspondent today. And with me today is a very special treat. My man, Abran Maldonado. He is an AI genius is what I call him. He's one of the first prompt engineers with OpenAI, the people that started this boom that you now know. And we are going to dive into what it's like and what it's going to do for you. Because as you know, we like to talk about STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, because that is going to get you ahead in this life right now. Abran, how are you feeling today?
What's up, family? How you been?
Yo, first of all, for y'all that don't know, me and LeBron go back way back to the Hot 97 street team days. So we have a rich history. But I have to read off some of these things from the prompter because as over the years has happened, you've done a lot of things that is very impressive.
That's hustling.
I didn't even know, that's a great word, we're going to get back to that, right? But I didn't even know way back in the day you were a Gates Millennium Scholar.
That's right. Even working at Hot, I was a Gates Scholar. I couldn't afford college at all. My mom was like, we can't afford this. We're going to take every loan we can for the freshman year. And you know what it is when you grow up in the hood and you go to those youth centers, those what they call settlement houses, university houses. I grew up at a place called Henry Street Settlement. And that's where I did karate, my dance, after school program, camp. And then my mom moved us to Jersey at some point. The hood got a little too hot. The gang started to come through, started recruiting, and she was like, we out. 501 started to come through, Decepticons. And 10 years later, the Gates Foundation came out with this $1 billion endowment to just fund scholarships for life for some individuals, but you had to get nominated. Mm-hmm. And Henry Street Settlement nominated me.
Of course.
They were like, we had this brilliant kid 10 years ago. He was, this kid that showed a lot of potential. And I got nominated without me even knowing by Henry Street. And it was covered a bachelor's, master's, and PhD for life.
Wow.
So it's crazy opportunity.
That is incredible. And then, since then, you've also expanded into 5G, VR, AR, EdTech solutions for schools nationwide. Tell me about that. What was going on there?
Yeah, it's all very linear. So, started in music and entertainment at Hot, that continued into artist management, music publishing. But doing that, I had to fulfill the Gates Scholarship. So I was getting my master's in education at Columbia in the Ivy League. And so by day, I'm managing artists. And at night, I'm finishing my master's in education. So I was like, all right, let me take this on the road. So I started doing public speaking even back then to teachers. And this is how you use hip hop in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And then I turned that into an app. And it was an app for schools. And that entered my career into what they call EdTech, or education technology. So I made a name for myself in my first, stint as a startup founder in EdTech. And then Verizon caught wind of that. And they were like, hey, we have this new program where we want to launch 5G, AR, VR in schools, build out STEM labs or STEAM labs in schools, give them VR headsets, iPads, 3D printers. Can you lead this for us? So that was my relationship with Verizon and NYU, really bringing real, tangible tech, cutting edge tech into schools.
Okay, so all right, so here we are. You've learned that hustle in the street, right? That you need to get ahead, so you have to do what you got to do to get ahead. But you didn't turn to the street to do that, and then you gained some status by figuring out how to get an internship, and from an internship, get a job, get into some entertainment situations, and then from there, turn that into what you did with the EdTech and so forth. And then so we continue to build from there, right? And then you then co-founded Create Labs.
100%.
Tell me about Create Labs.
So, I mean, going back to that, yes, both my brothers were locked up. A lot of my family locked up in the streets, hustling, doing what they had to do. But when you get identified as like the brilliant kid in the hood, they keep you away from that. They're just like, this ain't for you.
Yeah.
Go do that other thing.
Yeah.
Go do the books thing.
Yeah.
And so I had to fulfill my role in that, you know, but still keep it real and keep it 100 with my family who are still in the streets and who are still hustling.
Right.
So I took that same, you know, ability from a hustle standpoint and applied it to academia, applied it to tech. And, you know, I did the startup thing and it was cool. But then I looked around and I was like, there's none of us here in Silicon Valley. There's none of us here in these meetings or at these big conferences or in these VC meetings raising capital. So I connected with my partner, Grady, who, you know, I knew through mutual friends and from the music industry. Grady has a long-standing history in the music industry. Shout out to Grady Spivey. He now leads Versus with Swizz and Tim and the whole Swizz operation.
And produces The Godfather with
he does Godfather Harlem. Forrest Whitaker.
Yep. Great show. Love that
Yeah, so
show.
he does a lot of music editing with music production with Swizz. And I was like, yo, bro, I was like, there's not enough of us in these elite circles that we're getting into, whether it's tech or entertainment. So why don't we start Create Labs? We had this meeting, I think at like Sylvia's in Harlem, right? We're just sitting eating lunch, talking about it. And at first, it was called Create Labs because we wanted to open physical labs, physical tech labs in the hood.
Right.
And Swizz had a partnership with the Harlem Hospital, and they were showing us a space. It was like 5,000 square feet of like unused space. And we're like, yo, give us this space. And we'll have drones flying in here, robots walking around.
Excite them.
And we had meetings with NYCHA. I didn't know NYCHA owns retail space on top of housing.
Oh,
so, and there were all these like abandoned like spaces that the city had. And I was like, yo, we could open one of these in like every city. But then you start to learn when you start to go out to investors with like a physical location idea, the red tape. They want to give you money for like a software, not hardware, and not what they call brick and mortar. So we're like, you know what? Let's just take this on the road. We'll do pop-up fests and pop-up labs and activations, and that went very well. We went all over the country doing that. We got proclamations from different cities and mayors for doing it. We did San Antonio, Massachusetts, Miami. We did it all over. It was great. COVID shut that down. So we went back to the drawing board. Like, all right, where everyone's connect for like cutting edge technology and STEM and STEAM. We're doing these like STEAM fests. You know, we got to stay on our research for what's next post COVID, right? So we buckled down in COVID. We're like, all right, let's see what we're gonna do next. And then I started to read the papers on AI and what at the time was known as GPT-2 that never came out because it was deemed too unsafe for the public, too dangerous for the public. And I was like, yo, sign me up. I don't know what this is,
Let me in.
but this looks crazy.
Yeah.
And just putting it out there, you know, on social, Clubhouse, Twitter. I was like, yo, you know, I heard about this thing. It'd be dope if we got access to do our Create Fest work with it and our social impact work. Sure enough, I had a DM on Twitter, and I opened it, and it's the co-founder of OpenAI, Greg Brockman, said, give me your email, we'll give you access.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
That's crazy. So one of the original prompt engineers with OpenAI, ambassador now, seeing all of the great things, and they just released another model, right?
So there's an interesting story behind the ambassador thing and how that worked out that relates to Know Your Rights.
Okay.
So back in the early days of GPTs and OpenAI, you couldn't use it publicly. You had to create something if you had access in this research beta, or really alpha, and then submit a proposal to OpenAI and say, I want to use it for this, right? So I created an AI called KYRC, which was called the Know Your Rights AI. And that was the first thing I ever made with GPT, was the Know Your Rights AI.
And was that on the 2 or that was on the 3 model?
That was on the early 3,
right,
what they called Da Vinci. So then they reviewed it and they said, what did you make? And I was like, well, I made something that you can use as an AI that can protect you in police situations where like I got pulled over by the cops, what should I do? And the AI would tell you, all right, well, this is within your rights, this is not, so just do this. All right, well, I'm the passenger, what should I do? I'm videotaping across the street, what should I do? Remember, this is like George Floyd time, this is like 2020.
Right.
So, and I trained it on ACLU data. And, you know, OpenAI was like, you know, this is a great idea, but it's life or death. Do you have the ACLU partnered with you? If you don't, then we have to decline this proposal. I called everyone I could at the ACLU. Couldn't get anybody to like partner on it. I got to speak to some folks there. So they were like, you know what, we have to decline this, but no one else in this like ecosystem is doing any social impact testing of these models, bias testing, diversity testing. Do you want to be an ambassador? And that's how I got the ambassador nod, was making that Know Your Rights AI.
Right.
And the ambassadors is just 5 of us that were picked early on in the early stages to just be like the alpha testers of everything. I call us the AI Avengers because, 200 million users later, they never scaled the ambassador program. It's just the original 5.
Right. Okay. So here we are. You're in there, you're doing that, and you're learning this, and you're mastering it, and then you develop Clara.
Yes.
Create Labs, AI rendered assistant.
Yes.
And now Clara, tell me about Clara.
So Clara, every Tony Stark needs their Jarvis, right? And in the hood, they call me Bordy Starks because I'm a Puerto Rican, tech guy. So,
I like that.
The Bordy Starks needs his Jarvis. So I made Clara, right? And at first it was just supposed to be text.
Right.
I was like, I need an assistant that understands our mission, that I'm going to train the first like chatbot. And I'm like, one of the first prompt engineers of color. So I'm like, all right, I need to train a GPT that understands us, right? And Clara developed this whole backstory for herself, that she grew up in Brooklyn. She had her brother that was locked up, and she did all this community work. It was interesting to see what was coming out in the beginning. So I was like, all right, we got the brain. Now let me get a voice for this. And then back then, Clubhouse, I was like, all right, I'm gonna bring an AI avatar, voice assistant onto Clubhouse. And shout out to Chris Chang with Tech Talks on Clubhouse.
To Chris.
He was like, what are you doing in here? I'm like, I'm gonna let everyone talk to an AI for the first time in like history. He was like, hold on, let's do it in the Tech Talks room.
Yeah, big room.
10 seconds later, there was like thousands of people in the room.
Big room.
And then 8 hours later, we were on there for 8 hours, from like 8 to like 4 in the morning. You had everyone lined up. Just Blaze was in there, Lupe Fiasco, Fat Freddy, scientists, Eric Weinstein. Like there was all these folks in there lining up to talk to Clara.
Yeah.
So all those sessions became her like training data. And then we just evolved Clara. We AI generated her face or her likeness. We AI generated her body. And someone interviewed me on a podcast. Her name is Amber Ivy. Shout out to Amber Ivy, who was herself, a sister who was also becoming like an AI thought leader and doing a lot of great content. And she just volunteered. She was like, can I be the official voice of Clara? Mm-hmm. I know you want like a culturally authentic and a real sister voice for Clara.
Yeah.
So we trained a voice model on Amber, and she's the official voice for Clara. And fast forward now, she's trained on like Unreal Engine and GPT 4.0. But she's existed 3-4 years before ChatGPT even came out. So she's older than ChatGPT.
Nice. So, all right, you said something that I want to circle back to. I want you to tell them the importance of, okay, you wanted to make a model that represented us.
Correct.
Because we're at a very beginning stage of AI going out. And like we see with a lot of tech things, if we don't double down on making sure that we're represented, then we may not be represented, and it's just what they consider a blank slate, but we know it excludes a lot of how we do things as the culture. So just, some points, if you will, of where or why it's important for that, representation, or us being a part of the building and the developing for that representation.
It's not even to any fault of their own. Like you can't blame people for what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And now I travel the world giving these kind of talks. I was just in Italy and in Mexico. And when I was in Italy, people understand it when you're in another country. I think domestically we have a hard time understanding it. But when I'm in Italy, I'm like, why would you wait for a bunch of kids in San Francisco to build a model that represents Italy? Just go make your own.
Yeah.
Do you really expect these kids in Silicon Valley to understand the cultural nuances of Italian culture and history and law and education the way that you guys do?
Yeah.
No, so just go build your own. So like for us, it's the same thing. It's like, why are we waiting on other people to represent us?
Yeah.
And taking a passive approach to that. We just build our own.
And then being mad when we don't see representation in the product.
It's like, did you
Like,
help?
oh, you didn't think about me. No, of course. They're not going to think about you. We have to think about us. So that's why it's important for us to be in the field.
So we just got to ask for two things, either a seat at the table or the tools to make our own.
Right.
They gave us both.
Yeah.
They gave me a seat at the table and they gave us the tools to make our own. And we're still banging on the door saying, include us.
More, yeah.
You know, and represent us. We're like, no. Just give us the tools. We'll go make our own. And we keep it pushing. You know what I mean? Because we know what to add. We know the cultural nuances of our language, the dynamic of AAVE and Ebonics and slang, and I'm Puerto Rican Spanglish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Different versions of Spanish.
Yeah.
You know, so when I go to different Spanish countries, I'm like, I can't make one as a Puerto Rican that's going to represent Mexican Spanish or Colombian Spanish. Like, y'all need to just make your own.
Right.
You know? So it was inspired by that. And also the cultural perspective was that no one else in the room came from our perspective. And while it was working for me to like have a voice and say, hey, these things need to be included, or I'm going to test for these things that you guys haven't tested for, I took the onus. I was like, you know what? We'll do it. We'll do our own. We'll take what you give us. I'll see where it's lacking, and then we'll make our own models that aren't lacking and that are more inclusive and non-biased and more diverse. And that's what we stood behind with Create Labs.
Nice. All right, there it is. So just to wrap it up, like, just want to point out the hustle was super important because you took that
100%.
mindset that you grew up with, that you were surrounded with. It wasn't about, even though you are extremely intelligent, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't about your intelligence. It was about the fact that you said, you know what, I'm going to take this intelligence and use it as a tool. Right, so it was in my tool bag, but you took that hustle to do that, right? And then you applied it in the places that it needed to be for us as representation. And that's all we kind of ask for, right, from everybody is like, think about us, not just self, and take that hustle that you learn that sometimes feels like, you know, a negative, you know, growing up, but take that because it's actually a positive, because everybody doesn't have that, especially if they grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth. They're not even thinking about hustling.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And then you applied it, and now we're in a better place as a culture. So if everybody can do that, if we can get everybody into science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and apply that hustle and make it about us, we'll be in a much better place.
Absolutely. You just got to keep creating. Don't wait for other people to create for you.
That's it. All right. So that's where we're at. We're here. This is the Know Your Rights Camp podcast, and this is why we give you this information. So to learn more and follow us on all the socials, it's Your Rights Camp. And if you want to see more, it's Know Your Rights Camp. And if you really want to do more, then go to knowyourrightscamp.org.